One of the greatest artists, Van Gogh, said, "I tell you, the more I think, the more I feel that there is nothing more truly artistic than to love people." Love, that overused word in our society, but that powerful force that we focused on in Lent. Trying to cultivate habits of generosity, of stillness, of forgiveness. And religion, at its best, should help us love better. I'm getting to the point in my life where when people say, "What's your religion?" I want to say, my religion is love. I practice Christianity so that I might love better. I follow the teachings of Jesus that I might love more elegantly and extravagantly. Love is about waking up our essential goodness, waking up to that which is most alive in us and makes us most alive. I don't know about you, but I'm really loving Pete Buttigieg. I'm really loving him. The mayor of South Bend, Indiana, presidential hopeful. And here's why. I love the way that he talks about faith. That's what I'm loving about him. I haven't looked at his policies or anything political. I love how he's talking about faith. And if you haven't heard him talk about faith, it's a beautiful thing. And it brings into stark relief the kind of messages that we're getting in the mainstream about Christianity. He said, "I draw from my faith humility, servanthood, commitment to community." I don't know how far that will get him in the polls, but I do know that he's capturing some of the essence of what it means to love. I want to reflect for a moment today on compassion and how we make compassion a habit in our life. And I want to use the story that Judy read for us as a frame in how we think about it. So just for a moment, put aside any ideas you have about faith healing or faith healers, and let the story envelop you. A leper came to him. Leprosy was prevalent in that day, according to many historians. But leprosy and being a leper was more than having a skin disease. It meant you were a social outcast. So leprosy was not just a physical illness, it was a social illness. Prior to this story, Jesus had healed others in the synagogue and in the home. But a leper was not allowed in the synagogue, not allowed in anyone's home. And so he meets Jesus in this open field. The social isolation is perhaps what he needed healing from more than anything else. And I want to say to you that I think social isolation is one of the most prevalent conditions in our time. A leper came to him, begging him, kneeling, he said to him, "If you choose, you can make me clean." If you choose. It's a question of power, a question of will. How will you use your power? He didn't doubt Jesus' power. He wondered what Jesus would do with that power. Power is often used to keep people in their place, isn't it? Remember the famous words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her confirmation hearing? "I ask no favor from my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." Don't you love her? She was asking, how are you going to use your power? To keep people down? To keep women down? Power often reaches for the highest places, but love, like water, flows to the lowest, the least of these. So Jesus stretched out his hand and he touched him. He was moved by compassion, not by pity, because pity is from a power position. Pity is feeling sorry for someone. Pity doesn't move anyone to do anything, really. But compassion is different. The word for compassion in the Greek is splanchnousai. It means a profoundly intense emotional response. It is visceral. It's a gut feeling. It's hard for us to understand this word in our common day language in this translation. But the people around Jesus saw a physical response in him. Compassion connects us to people. It moves us to action. Compassion is not passive. After all, when you're passionate about something, you do something. And he was so moved. Jesus stretched out his hand and he touched him. It's hard to get the import of what that means. He touched him. This man had probably not been touched in a long, long time. In fact, the word in Greek actually means it was more of a caress. You didn't just touch him. It was one of those where, when you take somebody's face in your hands and you look them in the eye. I could tell you stories, many, about how people with AIDS, with that social illness and social stigmatization, I could tell you stories of what it meant just to have somebody touch you. What that did. That hand of Jesus was a tangible expression of God's mercy. That's why we say God has no hands but your hands. No hands but my hands. During those years, I was asked to go to UCSF and to speak to doctors and nurses about how to care for the LGBT community. And I said, well, the first thing you can do is touch us. Put your hands on us. Because maybe we need that more than anything. And then Jesus says these words, I do choose. Be made clean. I do choose. Moved with compassion, I do choose to touch you, to heal you, to bring you into a circle of belonging, to make you know that you are worthy, to lift you up. I choose to do that. I choose to act. I choose to extend myself. Half the things that go on in our lives are about choice. It's not because we can, it's because we won't. Is anybody with me so far? And then we come to this rather enigmatic part of the story, right? You have this amazing scene of Jesus reaching out and caressing this social outcast. And then all of a sudden, Jesus sternly says, now don't tell anybody about this. Go show yourself to the priest, or really, go back to the priest, like Moses commanded. So here's what I want to suggest. I want to suggest that Jesus was angry at the situation, at the system that had caused this person to be socially outcast. In fact, there are a few translations that instead of translating compassion, translates, and Jesus was moved with anger. He was angry at the system, a system that systematically demonized people who were diseased or disfigured or poor or slow to learn. Sound familiar? I don't know about you, but I am angry at a system that demonizes the immigrant, the poor, the Muslim, and the list goes on. I'm brokenhearted by a culture in Silicon Valley where achievement and body image and sex and success and on the social media is damaging our young people. Pressuring our young people to try to be something that they're not. Jesus says, go back, defy the system. You are clean, you are whole, you belong. And in holy defiance, go back to that system and say, I am whole, I am clean, I am worthy, I belong. Adrian Rich, the great poet, you've heard me quote it before because I feel like I live it every day. Anger and tenderness, my selves. To see them, I have come, to see them not as polarities, but as angels. Anger and tenderness, the spider's genius to weave in the same action from her own body anywhere, even from a broken web. I think that's what Jesus experienced. And I think that's what compassion calls us to do. To be angry and to be tender. And not as polarities. So, how do we do that? Very simply, I think, allow ourselves to feel. Allow yourself to feel. We have to ask ourselves, how do we stand before pain? Because there's a lot of it. Say, well, I feel overwhelmed, but don't use that as a way out. Everyone in this room can do something, can take one step. A small act of kindness and compassion. One of my best friends just lost her mother. And she's from Holland. And her family called and said, you need to come. And so my friend was trying to arrange the airline tickets, and she doesn't have much money. And she called Delta and said, do you have bereavement tickets? And she ended up with the kindest woman on the phone. Said, well, tell me about what's happening. My friend told her, and she said, let me see what I can do. She said, I just found you a nonstop from San Francisco to Amsterdam. Can you go tomorrow morning? She said, yes. She got on the plane. She got to Amsterdam, and her mother died an hour after she walked into that room. Okay? I don't know that this woman from Delta will ever know what she did to allow this person to have those last moments. Sometimes we get them and sometimes we don't. But this person's kindness allowed that to happen. It's so difficult to embrace pain and weakness, others and our own. We don't even know what to do with our own pain sometimes. And I don't know about you, but I hate being weak. I do. I want to be strong. But it's only in embracing my own that I can embrace others with grace. We have to embrace our own pain, our own weakness, so that we might embrace the pain and weakness of others. It's a question of power, and it's a question of love. Brené Brown says, the one who does all that research on shame, and she says, we can't be wholehearted unless we allow ourselves to be brokenhearted. We can't be wholehearted unless we allow ourselves to be brokenhearted. When I talk to people and they start to cry sometimes, they always say, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, don't ever apologize for having feelings. The world is overwhelming. Pain is overwhelming, but start small. With a touch or look into the eye. Compassion for yourself. And allow yourself to feel it is what breaks us out of the cocoons of protection that we have because we either have been hurt or we're simply afraid to feel too deeply. I'll end with this. Mark Nepo, spiritual writer, writes a book, 7,000 Ways to Listen. And he says this: I have been writing for 45 years, poems, stories, journals, dreams, essays, and all of it can be reduced to this phrase: no stranger in the heart. Like a bird who keeps waking in a new place only to sing the same song at the sight of light, all that I have written, regardless of where I find myself, ends up praising the mysterious fact that there are no strangers in the heart. Whenever we dare or are forced to lift each other up or ease each other down, we have the glorious chance to find what we've lost in each other. We've lost a lot in our society of what it means to deeply connect and see each other. And through compassion, may we find that which we've lost so that we might become whole. Amen.